Good evening. We are waiting for Peter and Paula. It looks like Peter just is joining now. So, Chair Farmer, I can check. Oh, good morning, Pete. Hi, or good afternoon, or good evening. So, Chair Farmer, we can check in with Commissioner Cohen. If you would like to begin, I will follow up with her.
Thank you, Sherry. This is the Redistricting Advisory Commission meeting for October 27th, 2021. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask the clerk to conduct roll call.
Chair Farmer?
Here.
Commissioner McAmey?
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Paulson?
Here.
Commissioner Zadie?
Here.
And Commissioner Cohen is not here at the moment.
I'd just like to establish that proper notice has been made for this meeting.
Proper notice has been established.
Thank you. So that brings us to agenda item number 2, matters from the public. Is there anybody hoping to speak on any matters under the jurisdiction of this commission, but not on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I think Commissioner Cohen may not be able to join us because there's a power outage in the Mendocino area and Little River. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you, Peter. Do you know the extent of that outage?
I
Yes,
don't.
Charlotte?
It's not affecting me because I'm not in the county at this point. I'm at my daughter's in Sacramento. But I did get an email from someone in the Albion area, and they said that it was from Mendocino south all the way to the Navarro, at least. So that's, unless she has a generator, you know, it may just be that.
Charlotte, I see your hand.
I was just going to suggest that staff give her a call. If perhaps she has phone service, she can call into the meeting. There's a number, Sherry, maybe if you could write that down. If you do reach her by phone and tell her, call this number, enter this code, then she could join us by phone.
Yes, I'll give her a call. Thank you.
And apologies to anybody who was hoping to participate in the meeting that has their power out. And obviously we'll be looking at the letters when they're written in. Imagine it's the equivalent of like a tree across the road in an in-person meeting. I did not hear if there are any matters from the public that are not on the agenda.
There's no matters at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 3, staff updates. Looks like we're going to get some public input regarding communities of interest including the maps from Sherry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sherry Johnson. So to summarize the public comments that we have received, so we've received over 55 comments to keep Mendocino in District 5, 52 comments to keep Laytonville in District 3, move Hopland to District 1, about 24 comments. We have 16 comments that favors map 8. 6 comments that limit all changes to equalizing District 3 and District 4. 5 comments to move Laytonville to District 4, only if moving Mendocino to District 5 or Hopland to District 1. 3 comments in favor of map 2, 2 in favor of map 1, 2 of map 7 in favor. Keep Redwood Valley and Potter Valley together in District 1, 2 comments. Add areas adjacent to City of Ukiah to District 2, 2 comments. 1 comment favoring map 9. Make District 5 more coastal, 1 comment. Move Mendocino to District 4, 1 comment. Move Covelo to District 1, move part of Covelo to District 1. 2 comments. Keep Ridgewood Park out of District 4 or District 5, 1 comment. And then public comment favoring maps or proposing boundaries which do not comply with redistricting criteria. There's 9 comments about that. So changing numbers of districts favoring maps 3, 4, and 6. And that is the update. And just to remind the public that all public comments are posted to our Mendocino County Redistricting website. And all the commissioners have received public comment. Thank you.
Through the chair, I can provide a brief update. As far as I can tell from reviewing various websites and through legal research, I do not see any current changes to the deadlines for our timeline on adopting final maps by December 15th.
Thank you, Charlotte. Do we have any commissioner comment on this item? Yes, Dee.
I figure now is as good a time as any. I would just like to respond to all or make a comment in reference to all the public comment that we've received. It's kind of frustrating for me on a personal level because Mendocino doesn't want any changes. Hopland wants to be intact. Laytonville wants to stay where they are. They don't want to change. Covelo wants to stay in 3. They don't want to change. Nobody wants to change, but yet we have to make some changes. It's just, I think the most frustrating part for me is the public comments that are not very nice. I mean, in their tone and their language, threatening to fight it with everything they have. And then you think about historically, Hopland and the Laytonville-Leggett area seem to always have to make the adjustment. And there doesn't seem to be any sense of community countywide that this is something that we all have to work together to find a solution for. And the word that just keeps coming up in these public comments is disenfranchisement. We're going to disenfranchise, the Mendocino community or the South Coast or this, that, or other community. And with no reference that by demanding that we leave you alone, someone else is going to have to be disenfranchised. So I'm just really disappointed that our whole community of the entire county isn't a little bit more forgiving, a little bit friendlier, and a little bit more willing to participate in the process in that this is what we can do to make it work. So I just wanted to say that out loud. I think that's been the most disappointing thing for me through this whole thing. After, of course, realizing that we cannot help the west side of the Ukiah, greater Ukiah Valley area at this time because of the population numbers. So that's all. I just wanted to say that out loud. Thank you.
Thanks, Dee. Mary, I see you have your hand raised.
Please. I want to thank Sherry for doing the combination of all the responding thing count, but she does it much better, and I appreciate that work. I think when it comes to their home, people are going to fight to the last person. And to say that you're going to have great enlightenment and sharing would be unusual. Hence, you can look at Congress. Some of the comments did kind of take me aback too, especially when they say, well, too bad about that district. But that's people. I've served on boards before. That's people. And in terms of the comments we've received, having sit in on the public comments that the Board of Supervisors received this week, we've done pretty well. I was waiting for the torch to come up the steps. But yeah, it's frustrating, but they're just not gonna, it's their home. They don't want to change. But yeah, I hear you.
Sherry?
Yes, Chair, I just want to give an update. First of all, Mary, thank you very much, but I have to give all the credit to Charlotte. She did all the work. So thank you, Charlotte.
Yay, Charlotte!
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, I did receive a message from Commissioner Cohen. She was calling right during the update. So she's driving into town to try to get service. So if we will watch for her and bring her into the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Dee, I see your hand back up.
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to, I meant to mention this last week too, and I forgot, but I think that we should address, just so people understand, we've gotten several, we received several comments that ask, why are we even doing this? And then we also have so many that are based on who they want their supervisor to be. And maybe just, so it's not coming from one of us, if Charlotte could just briefly remind the public that we can't take into consideration who you want your supervisor to be in our decision-making process, and that and exactly, and that just quickly why we're doing this, because we keep getting no's, and I'm kind of surprised at this point, but that's all.
Good point.
I'll only say this briefly just because we didn't agendize it, but it is obviously to talk about, this commission was created by the Board of Supervisors as in response to the Board of Supervisors requirement on every 10 years when the new decennial census numbers come out, the responsibility of the board to adopt redistricting, considering the changes in population that have occurred over the past 10 years. And so that is why we are conducting this redistricting. It's a state mandate. It's also a federal mandate. And in this process, the Board of Supervisors decided it wanted to appoint an advisory redistricting commission and selected the members of this commission. And that is why we're proceeding in this way. And all of the work of this commission will then be passed on and shared with the Board of Supervisors coming up in a couple of weeks. And then ultimately the Board of Supervisors, per their mandate, will adopt the final map and do so prior to December 15th. And if the public wanted to review any past presentations that we have posted, they summarize in more detail those the process and the legal requirements.
And Dee, since you mentioned it, I do think that if at the state level they were going to redistrict us in half, hopefully that would bring out some more Mendocino pride. And I agree. Unfortunately, I feel like the process did have us hear more of the voices of separation than unity.
Yeah.
And so there was a certain feeling reading through them of what are we like, neighboring warring nations? Like we're all in this pretty much together. So
yeah.
Peter?
I guess the first question, just as point of order, where are we on the agenda at this point?
I've totally lost control.
We're at item number 3. And as Dee mentioned, as good a place as ever. We're about to ask for public comment on this item, and we were simply having commissioner comment on the public input regarding communities of interest as described by Sherry.
Okay. I'll take my hand down. I got lost there.
Okay.
Trying to follow the bouncing ball.
So do we have any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment on this item.
Thank you. That moves us to number 4, community interest testimony. I want to ask staff if there's any live community interest testimony from the public regarding communities of interest.
There is no live community of interest testimony right now.
I guess there's no commissioner comment on it then.
No, I do.
So that actually just moves us.
No, I do.
Sorry?
I do. I have comments.
Oh, sorry. I thought that it would be comment on the lack of comment that when it happened. Go ahead, Dee.
Sorry. I just wanted to share that I did hear back from the tribal administrator in Covelo for the Round Valley Indian tribes. And their stand is they would just like to stay whole and in District 3. And then I also talked to Ulysses Velasquez, I think, at the Mendocino College as a different perspective for the Latinx population in the greater Ukiah area. And his position, his opinion is that he feels it serves the community better to be represented in multiple districts instead of having it all in one. He wanted it to stay the way it was, divided between the 3 districts. So I just wanted to share that since it was so different from what Juan Orozco had shared with us. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm trying to, in light of the other comments we had, I guess I'm going to try to take a more positive approach, at least. First of all, I want to say I got a lot more. I assume that all the other commissioners got the same information that I did from people either commenting on public comment or about communities of interest. But it seemed to me that this last week, my emails have just quadrupled. And there's a lot more interest on the part of the public than there had been in the previous weeks. I think maybe it's in part because of, as Kyle suggested, as soon as people start seeing maps, they're going to really wake up and start smelling the coffee, for lack of a better term. I share, it would be, always better if people are kind and civil to each other. But people do feel passionate. And in a way, I embrace passion about that. I think it's really, passion is a driver that gets people engaged in their communities and in their government. And so you want them to be kind and civil, but also passionate. And I thought a lot of the input we got this week was very informative. And I wanted to specifically comment. I got a number of communications this week, both by people contacting me directly or by sending me emails or through the communications that we got through the commission from the people in the Casper area. And I would hazard a guess to say that the overwhelming sentiment was that they did not want to see their community divided up into two supervisorial districts. And the way they viewed their community was a little bit different than the way that the people in the census viewed it. They viewed their community as really starting at what you might call Jug Handle Creek and going all the way south to the Russian Creek State Park Russian Gulch State Park, and east as far as the Jackson Demonstration State Forest and where the public lands supplant the private lands there. And in particular, there were 2 or 3 emails that I got where people stressed the fact that they've invested 20 years, the last 20 years of their life living in that area and working to build a separate Casper community identity that involves them purchasing and creating a community center in Casper itself in terms of saving the Casper Cemetery across the creek from what's I think deemed to be the community of or the census area, and as well as all the way down to Point Cabrillo and that state park. These memos indicated to me that there's a community there that sees itself separately from the village of Mendocino, that sees itself separately from Fort Bragg. And several people said that they go to both places. They often go to the village of Mendocino because it has certain assets, but they also go to the city of Fort Bragg for healthcare, for major shopping. It's a larger metropolitan area, offers greater services. So I just felt I needed to make that point because I think at our last meeting, there was some sense that the people in Casper really only felt like they were part of a community if they were north of Casper Creek. And all of the comments that I got from people said that was not true, that they felt very strongly that they had built a solid community that went from, like I said, Jug Handle State Park to the north, all the way down to Russian Gulch in the south, and to the east, all the way over into the Jackson Demonstration State Forest. So I think that was reflected in part in the summary that Sherry sent to us in terms of encapsulating the number of comments from people who didn't want to see that area divided into 2 districts. So maybe it's because I spend a lot of time over in that area and I talk to a lot of the locals that I guess I feel a certain kinship, even though I live in Fort Bragg, to that community. And I do have my daughter got married at the Casper Community Center a few years ago. I just think it's important to sort of stress that these living rural, it's a little different. I can understand Laytonville. I can understand Willits. I lived in Willits for a while. And I certainly understand the Anderson Valley and how they feel about their communities there. And I just felt that to honor the comments that I had received from people, I needed to make that what was expressed to me, pass that on to this commission as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Mary?
I agree with Peter. Certainly I learned a lot more history about Casper. They were very eloquent about being self-sustaining, serving their community and the land very, very honestly. So they were very eloquent letters, no doubt about it. And I learned a lot. However, I have future, I don't think now, but I can see in the future coming, you're going to have a new community of interest, and that will be the growers for marijuana. We've had lots of little tidbits and people coming up and talking to me and stuff, but I think we may see in the future, you may see them as a community of interest down the road. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, thanks, Mary. And we will be able to look at that border area and see what LEAF has figured out in the most recent drafts, and how we're addressing those community of interest problems in the next agenda item. But Dee, I see you have your hand raised.
Just to beat a dead horse, but I appreciate the passion of the Casper community and the Mendocino community, especially the way the Casper community has come forward and they don't want their community split. I just have to say that we need to it would be nice if everybody was given the same consideration. I live 7 miles from the city of Ukiah. I'm completely off the grid. I don't go anywhere for anything except for Ukiah. Ukiah is my hometown. We go there for everything. That's Parducci Road or Springs Road. Even as far as Reeves Canyon Road. We are all very, very rural communities also, and yet we have no voice because we have no choice but to be included in District 5. And that doesn't even include the south part of the greater Ukiah area. So while I appreciate that we may want to, Peter saying he wants to come from a positive place, it is really hard when you have communities who are in very similar situations, but because of population numbers or for whatever reason, we don't get that voice. And it is hard. It is hard to hear, don't touch me, don't change my situation, make somebody else make the change. And I just want to make sure that everyone who cares and everyone who's listening remembers that there is a whole community out there who does not have a choice and does not have a voice in this whole process. And our situation, our living situation and our environment is no different than all of these people who are coming forward and saying, don't touch us for all of these reasons. And I just don't want anybody to lose sight of that. So you'll probably hear me mention it several more times before we're done, but just a reminder. Thank you.
Thanks, Dee. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do have some public comment on this item. I'm going to let Ron Edwards in to talk.
Yes, thank you. I do think that there's a lot of areas to look at on why people want to keep a community of interest. I think Commissioner Zaidi hit it, is that there's a growing feeling of the growers community who are trying to have a voice. And I think that this would be really easy if all supervisors were cookie cutter, if they would all respond to emails the same, if they were all equally available. And I think that that has a lot to do with communities wanting to get together with who they feel comfortable with representing them. Also, when you look at the economic differences between Laytonville and, say, the coast, the amount of money that they would be able to contribute, and I'll go back history, the old days of money buried in the backyard are gone. Growers are straddled with fees, taxes, so they really don't have that ability to contribute to campaigns like they would in the coast. So that also leads to a fear of not being on an equal playing field when it comes to representation. So I hope you can take this, little understanding of what the background is of why people might want to stay in their communities of interest. Thank you.
That's it for public comment.
Well, let's move on to item number 5. Consideration of maps based on community input. And it looks like Leaf is going to bring up another redistricting map.
Yes, Chairman Farmer, the maps that you have not seen, or at least not talked about too much, is draft 8. And I can share my screen and show that really quickly. Draft 8 was placed on our website, the redistricting website. It basically does one thing. It had a one, the goal was to take care of the population difference between the 3rd and 4th district without trying to do anything to districts 1, 2, and 5, because for one, they did not have their population was within the range and didn't need to be adjusted. Although, arguably there are some improvements that could be made there. So given the limitations of the concept of this map, you can see that we were able to put more of Laytonville area into the, actually keep it in the 3rd district. So you can see here's the town of Laytonville, here's the area around Laytonville, going up Highway 101. We're able to put a lot more of that area into the, or keep it in the 3rd district. I wanted to show you really quickly. In red here is the current district boundary. So you can see what areas have been moved in to the 4th district here and here to try to balance that population. The other changes were that this area down in here, the southern area of District 4 was moved further into District 5. I'll zoom in a little bit there. Here's Highway 20 here. Here's Willits. So we move this down. The red again is the current boundary. So you can see how that changed. This was an area in District 5 that was moved into District 4. So the black thick boundary here is the proposed boundary. And we did come up to brook trails and some of the Sylvandale subdivisions in this area that are clearly within the brook trails Willits community of interest. So we were pushing that one to the max to try to get this population balanced. The other item that of interest to many people is that we did not adjust this boundary here. That's as you can see, that's pretty much the current boundary. We did work on another draft map 9, that took this area here and left that in the 5th district as well. So we actually made an improvement here to change it even less than what this map shows. Most of this boundary line here comes to the boundary line of the Conservation and Mendocino Redwood, the Land Trust and the Mendocino Redwood properties. Keeping Compshe, of course, in the 5th district, but yet giving a little bit of more population to the 4th district to try to balance that. The other item is that you can see we took a little bit of the 5th district and pulled it back a little so that it would not be east of 101 in this area here. There's not a lot of population, but we were able to, one of the other criteria that a lot of people have been asking us to do is reduce the size of the 5th district. So in some sense, we're reducing the size of the 5th district while we're balancing the population. The other change that this includes is, you can see in red here, the current district of, here's the 1st district, Potter Valley and Redwood Valley. Again, we brought this up to include Upper Tomkai and Cave Creek subdivision. And again, up in here, not too much population up in here towards the National Forest, but it does help to reduce the population of the 3rd district, which was rather large. And that's what one of the tasks we have to do if we're going to balance the population there. Okay. In the southern area, we did not make any changes other than from previous versions. It's hard to tell on this map. Let me go to, let me bring in one of the other maps here. Yeah, draft 8, okay. So this area up in here was left in the 1st district. And in draft 8, this area here was left in the 1st district. And that's currently the way our boundaries are now. So no changes were made to the 2nd district in this particular version, in version 8. In draft 9, in previous drafts, we were able to take this area south of Ukiah, but adjacent to the city. This is Norgard Lane. This is north of Norgard Lane between the airport and State Street. And this is down to Plant Road here. We're able to take this area and put it into District 2 and some of the other options. In draft 9, the only area that I could get into that 2nd district would be this neighborhood, sandwiched between the airport and State Street, and then this area here on the north side of Norgard Lane.
Lee, I just want to make sure you're aware. I did check with Charlotte, and she did seem to think it was within the rules to look at draft 9.
Okay, then we'll look at that map next. I don't know if anybody has any questions on this map, but again, the concept was to primarily just to see if we could balance the population here with getting more of the Laytonville area into the 3rd district based on public comments from their town hall meeting. So let's skip to map 9.
Peter, do you have a comment on draft 8 before we move over?
I do. I just wanted to say that in looking at draft 8, I thought it was a significant improvement up in the Laytonville area. It seems we're getting through an iterative process closer and closer to a solution that seems to honor both the Laytonville area and the Covelo and the community of interest that's represented by the tribes in the Covelo and Laytonville area. So I thought at least that boundary line was a significant improvement over previous maps, and appreciated it.
I just wanted to mention too on draft 8, and I mentioned this during the Laytonville meeting, and Mary graciously repeated it too. I haven't heard anybody who arguing that they prioritize keeping Laytonville whole in the grandest sense of what that could mean over staying in the 3rd. But that is, I do think that could be a possible map. Because there's always, to me, in all of these different situations, there's 2 questions. One is how to keep the largest sense of that community whole. And everybody has a different feeling of how large that community of interest is. And the second question is which district it's in. And in many of these cases, the compromise that we're making, because it seems to be the one that is sort of satisfying the letters we're getting, is to minimize to some extent what might be understood as that community of interest, and prioritizing keeping it in the district that is being preferred over keeping it whole in the largest sense. So far, that's what we've been hearing from the public. And so that's the way these maps have been being drawn. But that isn't the only path forward in terms of keeping communities of interest whole. There is a very reasonable map that could be drawn that has everything that you could ever call Laytonville in the 4th. But that's not what we've been hearing. What's sort of frustrating to me, I guess, to follow what Dee was saying, is that most of what we've been hearing as to why people don't want that is based on who currently is the supervisor, and the way that the supervisors are currently interacting with Laytonville, which is a product of the way that the lines are currently drawn. So at some point in some of these places, it's kind of like in cellular biology, when something like squeezes through a membrane, at some point, some of these places, it might make more sense in the other district. That doesn't mean that the supervisors moving forward won't be fully capable of addressing that. In the case of these sort of larger moves that could be made, there will be significant incentive to pay attention to priority of interest, which is the negative side of doing it the way that we're doing it, which is the way the public wants us to do it. So I'm not arguing we should do anything else, but that's sort of minimizing the definitions of community of interest in order to make the maps work. So if in a future Laytonville meeting, for example, people start realizing that they would rather have some of those, that it's more important to have the outlying areas of Laytonville within their community than to be in District 3. That might at some point, in 10 years from now, be a good pathway. It certainly doesn't seem like that's what we've been hearing this year. Though we are hearing from people from Branscombe, for example, that might feel that way. I just wanted to mention that because I don't feel like I was able to get it across, and I've said it before.
So having completed draft 8, the next idea was, well, that worked. Can we go back and revisit getting Hopland into the 1st district, or at least as much as Hopland as we've shown in previous draft maps? So that was my task. And again, let's go to this area here. Same boundary here, although I was able to approximate this line here between Mendocino and Casper more exactly to the current boundary. So hopefully that will help those folks in realizing that their boundary is not going to change if a map of this type is approved. Same boundary here. I was trying to make sure that, the boundary, as I mentioned to the supervisors during their meeting, does touch Ridge Road right up here. So there are a few areas right here that would, on the west side of Ridge Road, for just a very short distance, some Brook Trails lots that would be in the 4th district at the outer edge of Brook Trails. And the idea was keeping as much of this as possible in the 3rd district, because not only is Brook Trails, but there's a number of subdivisions, Sylvandale being one, and I just use that because that's the name I know, adjacent to Brook Trails that are pretty much all considered the Willits community of interest. And, I didn't want to trade one problem area for another. If we fix one area, it doesn't do as much good to then create a problem somewhere else. So again, we've taken, some people have mentioned up in Laytonville that, gee, why don't you go towards Willits? Well, we have. So, there's a tricky problem here in balancing this population between the 3rd and 4th districts. One, the 4th district has to increase, and then there's a significant decrease in District 3. But yet we're still maintaining communities of interest. And that's, one of the primary things we're looking at. Again, this is the same as in version 8, pretty much. I did adjust this boundary down here to be more in line with the current boundary. Again, I moved this boundary to the highway to get rid of a little bit more, so that trying to keep District 5 from going east of Highway 101. So District 5 is losing quite a bit of area in here, a little bit of area here. And this is the same area as in draft map 7, I believe, where we were looking at putting the Hopland census designated place plus a little bit more area and everything on the east side of 101 into the 1st district. So as you can see here, the numbers are getting a little further afield. District 4 is still quite a bit under at 4.28, percent off of the average. And District 3 is still pretty high at 3.27. But the overall variation from the least to most populated districts is 7.31. Now that's starting to get a little high. But, there has been a lot of comment of that, well, let's see what we can do with balancing the population and keeping communities of interest whole, and then see how this number pans out. So again, it's under 10%. So my guess is that this is a viable scenario. One of the difficulties, again, is in the Ukiah area. And although it didn't show this map, we talked about the concept at the board meeting. And let me pull, see if I can get the, you bear with me just a second here. I will open up a more detailed version of map 9. I only have so much room on my screens for so many maps open at one time. So battery high. Red is the current boundary. Again, I mentioned that I was able to pull these neighborhoods here between the airport and State Street into District 2, and these two small blocks north of Norgard Lane into District 2. The problem being now is that District 2 is starting to get very large. It's over 3%. District 3 is still the largest one, but again, that's just and with District 4 being 4.27 under. So the difficulty is, yeah, you could add a little bit more to District 2, but you're widening that distance between the least populated and the most populated. Let's move to the north side. And here again is the problematic area. And doing all the things we did to the first district, keeping this is currently in the first district, as you can see by the red boundary. This neighborhood up in here, just outside of the city of Ukiah. We had to move that into District 5. I don't think that's a concept that the District 5 supervisor was in favor of, being that the first district supervisor was commenting in earlier meetings about what is that little finger that sticks out on the side of my district, you know, shouldn't that be in District 2? Well, probably should be in District 2. It's part of the Ukiah City, you know, community of interest. Again, it's the issue of balancing that population. So in this scenario, although we were able to get a little bit more of the southern area into District 2, it wasn't very much of a change, to tell you the truth. You know, and what can we do? Well, we could put these areas back in the first district and see how the numbers work. But then where are we going to find numbers for the 5th district? Because you can see here, the 5th district now, as it stands with draft 9, is starting to get quite a bit under. It's under 18,000. If we take too much of this and put it back in the first district, which right now the first district is almost at the average. So you can take a little bit of this and put it in the first district. You might be able to, if you wanted to increase the second district, although it's pretty high, you might be able to take a few, but you're still going to have some in the 5th district. So if you did that, then you split this neighborhood into 3 supervisorial districts. So one of the things that, you know, this area, I don't know why the blocks are this way. Before it was split here. So that's why you have this current boundary this way. But trying to keep these folks in, at least, you know, it's that question, is it better to have your neighborhood all in one district? Or is it better to be split up into multiple? And, you know, I don't have an answer for that one. You know, that's something that the commissioners might want to take a look at. We can move some these around if you want to look at it. It's a problem. And, you know, I can make the numbers balance this way, but it may not be the best configuration. So that's where we are on draft 9. I think draft 9 goes a long way to keeping communities of interest whole, at least in the same district. It doesn't deviate too far from the current, only to balance the population between the 3rd and the 4th, and to add Hopland into the 1st.
So Lee, or did you have something more to?
No, that's the end of my presentation.
First, I was wondering what the road directionality is of the Compchi area that was moved. What sort of, hopefully they have an evacuation route the other way, but what's the general road directionality there?
Well, Compchi is right here. So you got Ukiah Compchi Road that runs east-west. And then you have Flynn Creek Road that comes down here to Highway 128. This is Flynn Creek Road. And it comes down to Highway 128, which of course, goes out to Highway 1 and at one end and down to Sonoma County, or could cut off to 253 to Ukiah Valley.
And of the area that's now in 4, under draft 9.
Yeah, these are pretty much either held in, these lands here are either Mendocino Redwood Timberlands or the Conservation Fund lands. And we can take a look at some of that.
So that wasn't so much a population balancing as a geographic reduction move there.
It helped a little bit, but you can see there's 4 people here. There's 7 people. These are 0, 0. And I believe this is the river, so it's somewhat of a natural divide. But we are picking up some population, and we're making the 5th district physically smaller.
And but in general, are those the people living there? Are they driving out to 20 to get places, or are there bridges across the river they're taking? What?
Mr. Chairman, if I might speak to that, I've lived over in that area for a number of years, and I've walked a lot of that area. And if I'm reading the map properly, the dividing line is Big River. Is that right, Leaf?
Yes.
So there are no real bridges across Big River through that area. It's a really rugged kind of remote area that abuts the woodlands, Mendocino Woodlands State Park, and Jackson Demonstration State Forest. That's the population on that side of the river that would be in the 4th would in all probability be driving out fire roads or unimproved roads over to Road 408, which is the road that connects the village of Mendocino and Highway 20, and it's a dirt road. So there really isn't a lot of connection between the people that would be in the 4th district and the people that would be in the 5th district based on the topography.
And you had your hand raised before, so did you have something else you wanted to say?
Well, I had a question for Leaf about map number 8, and this actually shows up on several maps when I was doing the math, and I suspect the answer is simply just rounding. But when I was looking at our earlier map, map number 8, it says that the variation from least populated district to most populated district equals 6.9%. But the 2 districts that have the greatest variation are the 3rd and the 4th. And the 3rd has a variation of positive 3.06, and the 4th has a variation of minus 4.06. So if I added those 2 together, I come up with 7.12 rather than 6.9. And I noticed when we took an earlier glance at map number 9, there was a similar discrepancy. So Leaf, is that just because of when you figure out what those variances are at the granular level of the district, they're, because of rounding, they're a little bit different than the way they exist at the macro level of the entire county?
Well, let's look at District 8. And again, it may be more that it's a typo on my part or a miscalculation than a rounding error. But
yeah, just look at map 8.
I'm looking at map 8 here. The lowest one is 17,582. I'm doing a lot of these kind of late at night, so I try to send them out to Charlotte and Sherry to proofread
You're the
might work.
guru of maps, man. You got my admiration. I just wanted to point it out so that,
So here's the lowest on version on 8. And here's the formula that I use basically is, and then divide by the highest, 885. So that gives you that, subtract by 1 times 100. So I do get 6.9.
okay, so now go back to map number 8 on your
That is
screen.
map number 8. That's,
I know, but go back to map number 8 if you don't mind, just
Oh,
so you
sure.
know what I'm talking about.
let me bring it over. I have it over on the other side of my screen here.
All right, so go over to the far right side where you have the deviations and amplify that. So you see what I'm saying? If you add District 3 and District 4 together, you come up with 7.12.
Oh, those could be rounding.
That's why I was
I
asking.
get long figures there and I round it to the first 2 decimal places.
Okay, that's all I wanted. I've noticed that on several maps, and I just wanted to get clarification that we understood that there would be a difference between the gradual level, district by district, in terms of variation versus the overall. Okay.
Yeah, to get this figure, the formula I'm just using, I divide the lowest populated area by the highest, subtract the sum of that division by 1, and then times 100. So if anyone wants to recreate that, that's the formula that I'm using to determine the variation between the least and most populated districts.
Thank you.
So Leaf, so looking for example at draft map 9, the only numbers here that are going to alter the total deviation between least and most populated is if we're changing the least or the most populated. Anything else we do won't affect that. Am I correct?
Well, there are, you can take a look at, for one, I think your commission has put a lot of work into determining this boundary between 3 and 4. And I don't know how much more we can do with that without drastically affecting somewhere else. I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping this boundary over here the way folks want it. Again, this
that enforces what I'm trying to say. I mean, if you look at District 3 at positive 3.27 and District 4 at negative 4.28, at that point, small changes between 1, 2, and 5 actually are not going to influence the total deviation. If District 2 was at 3.27 as well, this 7.31 would not change. Because it's the total deviation.
Right, but you have to be careful of not dropping District 5 below a certain amount.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not saying we should do this, but as long as District 5 doesn't drop below 4.28, that also won't modify 7.31.
It should not, as long as District 2 does not get higher than District 3. You're correct.
So that is within, that is sort of where the leeway is, without changing the 7.3.
And as I mentioned, there's room to work on this, and that's something that we can look at right now, or
and those in some way are the sort of the limits of how much we can work on this. Those sort of set the parameters around which we can sort of try to work on the Ukiah question a little bit.
Well, the commissioners could take a look at anything they want. But in terms of the evolution of your process, I think you've done some really hard work, and realizing that major changes in one area will probably require you to change something in another. So it's how the commission wants to limit their alterations on this map. And we can certainly see how those are going to affect the outcome one way or the other. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but
yeah, no, I just kind of wanted to point that out, I guess, about the way the math works with the total deviation, that we clearly can't do anything that's going to make 4 smaller or 3 bigger, or we're going to really make things hard for ourselves. But within that range, what we do inside of that range will not increase the range. So I guess I would ask D if you're going to change one census designated, or not, sorry, census tract in this map, based on we haven't been receiving a lot of community of interest letters from Ukiah, but based on being the second district commissioner, what would you say?
I would be interested in seeing what the change would be if we added that neighborhood north of Empire Drive to District 2. It would change District 5 and District 2. So it wouldn't touch District 4 or District 3, and just to see what that would do to the numbers. There are those census blocks that are west of what's designated as District 2 now. And I don't think the population is really is great out there. And just expanding District 2 out to include those big blocks that are partially in District 2 now and partially in District 5, to put those entire census blocks into District 2. I'd like to see what that would do.
Would you like to see those two things separately?
Either way, either separately or together. I don't think the blocks west of District 2, the current green area, will have that big of an effect, but maybe we could just do them all together and see what happens. Yeah, those three
Farmer,
right
are we
there.
talking about these 3 areas
Yes.
right in here?
Yes.
Okay, let's take a look at that then. So there's not a lot of population out there. There's not much change here. The real population obviously is up in here.
Right.
And there's quite a bit of people up there. Let me,
I think we determined there's like 1,100 people there last time.
so I'll grab it all right now just to see how that affects everything.
Boom.
So yeah, we're into the 20,000 and 9.115 over. And of course, you can see what that does to District 5. They're 800 now.
Yeah.
So and again, we reduced the size of District 5 quite a bit. So that's where they're picking up a lot of population. If we again, this is what I was wrestling with today, is how much of this area could be in one or the other. And then
Right.
I kind of gave up because you know, is that really the right thing to do? Oh, excuse me, wrong one. So, you know, here again, putting some, only a part of it in District 2 and leaving some in District 5. You know, we're 4.3 here negative and 5.3 here, and that's getting pretty close probably to that 10%. So even those minor changes are somewhat difficult. Let's back here, take a couple more. You know, we've improved that a little bit, but District 2 is still pretty high.
I think if we're going to include that neighborhood, I think it should all be intact. So I would like to see, if we're going to not be able to take the whole neighborhood and put it into District 2, that everything north of Empire Drive should be together. I think that's the best division of that neighborhood.
It could be. These folks here have been in the 2nd district, you know, for a while. So
Right.
They don't see us putting them into the 5th district.
No.
You know, it's one of those things that a change, it's unfortunate, but a change later in the process when people don't think they're going to be changed creates as much consternation as if we had changed them early on and given them opportunity to comment. But let's take a look at that. That would certainly help District 5. This one actually, this little piece here kind of runs down and so we're looking at all of that. And your numbers are actually pretty good. You know, District 4 is still the low person. But putting all that in, you know, really bumps up District 5, of course. And makes District 2 look a little bit better. It may even give you room to take a look more at the southern end as well. I don't know if you want to do that. Take a look at how the numbers would.
Leaf, there's that one block on the, it looks like it's on the west side of 101. It looks like it's District 1 right there.
Yeah, it currently is. You can see the current boundary. That's because that's the city boundary there.
Okay. All right.
You know, it's mainly commercial. It doesn't have to be in the 1st district. In fact, I bet you, let's take a look. Does it even have, well, there's 18 people there, so. You know, and this is the Rush Street Triangle that the city keeps trying to annex, but they have not annexed it yet. So, you know, that's another whole, that's a 0 population block. There are 30 people in this block though. And 18 here.
Is that State Street that's running?
This should be State Street right through here.
Right. So that triangle block, isn't that partially the fairgrounds?
Yeah.
Let's take a look here.
Pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. See, that's state property. It's Redwood Empire Fair, but it is owned by the state of California. And So it has some quirky natures to it. I know that because I served for many years on the Redwood Empire Fair Board.
Yeah, they're showing that 30 people amongst us somewhere in here are living
There's
there.
there's several new complexes that have been built in that area, not there, but below there.
Yeah, this is the Rayleigh's shopping center there.
Oh, that's the Rayleighs. Okay, so then the area just below that along State Street is the fairgrounds, yeah.
Yeah, there's the
But
track right there.
There's, yeah,
Driving
some
range.
apartments in that area. Yeah,
But we also have this area to the south. And let's see, change that to District 2. Looking at bringing this area down to Plant Road. Yeah, it does make the second district a little bit high.
But still not as high as District 3, right?
Correct. Yeah, that could be done. But that means we took the whole part of that neighborhood up there that was in the second district and put it in the fifth with the rest of it.
So it's probably better to leave that in District 2 on the north side.
See what that does if we leave this the way it is. Although that's got quite a few people in it. Whoops. Where's the other one? Yeah. Yeah, that's going to increase that somewhat. Let's take a look at what those numbers would be. Let's get out my magnifying glass to see those numbers. Yeah, we've gone up a little bit, but we're still under 8.
Yeah. I know Supervisor Williams will not like that he's still, that one section is still in District 5, but I think that this is a good option. At least it gives more room on this in the south into District 2.
It is an improvement down here. That's the way we had it in one of our earlier drafts, where we were trying to see what we can incorporate that was adjacent to the city, south of the city. District 5 currently includes this Oak Knoll, Fir Crest area. And over here, one side of Lover's Lane and Pinoleville and the college is also in the 5th district.
Right.
So in one sense, you know, I know Supervisor Williams was talking about the travel time. And I think this version significantly reduces that travel time, and the fact that he doesn't have Old River Road, Hopland, Highway 175, Old Toll Road,
Right.
all these communities and people out here would no longer be in his district. So, you know, that would save considerable amount of time. You know, it's just by its very nature, one of the largest districts that we have. And what I mean by its nature is because of the population density isn't extremely high. There's only one incorporated city. You know, there's an incorporated city in every district except for District 5, with the exception of Point Arena, which only has about 460 people. So, I mean, they have unincorporated communities in the 5th district that have twice that many people. So the population density is very, very different in the 5th district. And that's why it's so large, obviously. But I think that the commissioners have made a really good effort in reducing the size of the 5th district. I was kind of hoping that the supervisors would see that. And maybe they have. They had a lot of issues they wanted to discuss, but to me, that's a significant reduction.
I would like to keep this map as an option.
I can work that up tomorrow and get it published tomorrow, more than likely.
Leif, I am curious, where is the Four Corners meet there?
Well, we kind of changed that a little bit.
Over by Seabiscuit.
Ridgewood Grade.
Let me see. I've got too many lines on here that's a little bit confusing. Let me turn a few things off here. 8 is not there. I didn't want to show draft 8. So appears to be the rock quarry that you see going up the grade.
So it would be the area of Ridgewood Ranch, maybe?
Ridgewood Ranch is right down here.
Okay, so that's
Although
there.
they own a lot of property, it may go up to their property. Actually, they own property on both sides of the freeway.
Right. So it looks like it's just to the south of the grade so it's on the south side of the grade.
Which I think might be the highest point. Is that the highest point?
Howard Forest. Howard Forest is the highest.
There's Howard Forest right there. And I'll zoom out a little bit. So there's Howard Forest. There's the rock quarry. And it's just south of the rock quarry.
So it's just before you get to the top.
Yes.
There's a little bit of unity for you, right?
Yes, I guess. I mean, but this area right here is just another example of what I was talking about earlier, because the south side of Blackhawk is in District 5 or District 4 now, I think. Isn't the boundary there? Is that Blackhawk Drive? Williams
It
Ranch
is
Road?
one of those roads.
Yeah,
We have Muir Mill Road, Williams Ranch Road, and
Blackhawk and all that. So that, I mean, their community is Willits, and now they're in District 4. There's just no good way to do it.
Yeah, this particular area right here was in District 4. Then in the last time around, it went to District 5.
And it should be in District 3.
And
know,
it probably should be in District 3.
It
You're
should be in
right.
District 3. It's just like the below the boundary right there on District 5, like from Reeves Canyon to York Creek should be in District 1. You know, there's just no good way to do it. I mean, you know, and maybe if we had a higher participation with the census and our numbers were higher, it would give us more room to play with that. But with what we have to work with, I don't think there is a good solution where it's just is what it is.
So are there any other, are there any other public comments that are coming to any commissioners' minds that have yet to be explored within these draft maps?
I think we've done a good job in trying to cover everything.
I just, I have a caution. And it's this, it goes back to our central kind of hierarchy of priorities for redistricting. The first hierarchy, the highest hierarchy of need is to equalize the districts in terms of the most populated area or most populated district versus the least populated district. That's the standard that the courts have given us, and I get that. But there are lots of different ways, as Kyle pointed out. If that's just an issue between two districts, you can do that. Then the other question is, what is your role? What is our role relative to the other districts and balancing them out? And that's where, in my mind, it gets a lot more murky, because we're given a whole bunch of different rules that have to do with census designated places and communities of interest and geographic boundaries. And so I think there's two schools of thought. And I just want to plant this thought in people's minds a little bit, that in terms of defending a reapportionment, it's the axe and razor theorem, I guess, is that the simplest answer is the best one as far as the courts are concerned, that gets you to where you need to be. And when you go beyond that, you need to be careful that you're really on firm grounds. Otherwise, what happens is that the process becomes subject to being challenged on the basis that we've gone beyond what we really needed to do in order to equalize the districts. So while it is possible to move people from one district to another without changing the variance between the most and the least populated, doing so needs to be justified on the basis of some really good, solid reasoning. Otherwise, the more people that are moved around, the higher the probability somebody is going to challenge the reapportionment and take it to court, which would be an expensive process for everybody involved. So I just want to sort of, I know I'm Eeyore, the sky is falling kind of guy, but you know, I just think we should be careful and make sure that if we're going to make changes, that they're well justified and that we could march into court and defend them with a high degree of confidence that a court wouldn't say, you really didn't need to do that in order to accomplish what you needed to do. And that's just my opinion. And I'm not an attorney. At best, I'm an old county clerk who's been through this several times. So I throw that out.
Peter, is there a specific part of the map that you are concerned about that you want to talk about there?
No, not particular, but one of the things that I did as just sort of a personal analysis is I looked at, I went through the maps, and for each of the maps, I subtracted the original population of that district, the one that's in the current district right now, from what would be in the proposed map. Now, I didn't have map 9, so I did maps 1, 2, 5, 7, and 8, because the other ones that have been submitted were so far out of alignment that they didn't warrant being considered because of that. They exceeded the 10% variance. And so one of the things that I got from that analysis was that when you look at District 2, you're only impacting about 1,041 people in map number 2, you're only impacting 1,042 people. You're taking 1,041 people out of District 3 and you're sticking them in District 4. Now, I'm not arguing that this map number 2 is the best map, but
can you clarify? Just stop for a second, because you were saying District 2. So I want to make sure I'm following.
Let me clarify that. So when you looked at map number 2, if you look at how many people were moved from one district to another in map number 2, the total was 1,041 people were moved from District 3 into District 4. And all the other districts in map number 2 stayed the same. There was no change. When I looked at map number 8, the number was somewhere around 1,200. But when I looked at the others, they were well above 2. Well, I mean, if you just do the differences work out to be about twice the number of people being moved in the other maps than were moved in maps number 2 or number 8. And so what I'm saying by that is that just looking at those raw numbers, how many people were moved from one district to another, for what purpose? Was it to equalize the population? If it wasn't to equalize the population, was it to respect a community of interest or to respect a census designated area? And if so, you need to have real good, strong arguments to say that that's why you had to do it. That's my point, if you want to defend this in court.
So for me, looking at the map right now, we're still looking at draft map 9. The only change that has been made without pretty significant communities of interest letters is the movement of District 1 North to include Upper Tomkai. We have not received any public comment saying that is the preferred drive path of Tomkai. I know you can drive to Covelo, you can drive out to Willits. But Leaf, in past years, has the inclusion of Upper Tomkai been something that's been discussed? How would you respond to that Upper Tomkai area?
Well, I think let me not talk for those people.
I can.
It's up for them to determine their community of interest. But in driving the county, you head north out of Redwood Valley, you hit the Tomkai area. You don't really feel like you're out of the valley, out of Redwood Valley community. Folks up in Cave Creek, that's probably a stretch. And I would leave it up to them to decide if they have more affinity to being part of a community of interest with Tomkai and Redwood Valley as opposed to Willits. You know, again, the attempt there was, I believe it's minor, but we did need to get that population of the first district down. If there's
Or of the third district,
the third district, excuse me, yes.
which was
Right
in
now-
response to the really strong community of interest letters that we got trying to avoid Laytonville. So there is sort of an implicit rationale for why we did that. It was implicit to the interest of Laytonville.
Correct. That was an abundance of public comment to maintain a community of interest. Again, this is just a concept of how do you bring down that population of the third district. That was the rationale, was population balancing. You know, I guess you can make pro and con about whether or not Tomkai and Cave Creek, again, their affinity is to Redwood Valley or Willits. I can't answer that question, but I think if you're driving that area, that's your route of driving. You know, if you live in the Cave Creek subdivision, you know, that's a pretty rural subdivision. Do you get there out of Willits or do you get there out of Redwood Valley? You know, that would be the question.
Well, hopefully, if anybody from Cave Creek is listening, please write in before the next meeting.
And if the
But I do
commissioner,
think, I'm not sure, Peter, that I agree with that. I mean, it's an interesting quantification to look at, but I think that what we saw was when we tried to treat this as a sort of first order problem and look at only districts 3 and 4, we weren't coming up with maps that were reflecting community of interest. And once we did do a little bit of that multiple trading and sort of, and Leaf, you know, took it on as a second order problem, I think that the map improved. So that's how I think, in terms of any changes that have been made outside of what has been justified through public comment, has been implicitly justified through public comment. And we're also, you know, achieving things that have, in terms of the Hopland question, that have been on the table for, you know, longer than I've been here. So, Dee, you had your hand up, and then Mary.
Yeah, to respond to what Peter said first, I feel confident that we have been very thoughtful in the decisions that we've made on these maps. I personally don't think that we have anything to be worried about if somebody were to actually take this to court, kind of thing, because I do believe we have been very thoughtful. And I lived off of Tomkai on Fisher Lake Drive for 15 years, up until we lost our home in the Redwood Valley complex is when we moved. And at least that side of Tomkai does identify with Redwood Valley. I can't speak for Cave Creek, but I can tell you that Tomkai, in as far as the neighborhood that I know out there, identifies more with Redwood Valley. So, and I think the fact that we first looked at the population question, which is the number one criteria, and then now are working within those numbers to maybe make sense of some of these communities, I think we are perfectly justified in the decisions that we have made. And I really am confident that we've been very thoughtful. I would like to do the math, Leaf, please. I would like to do the math with putting all of that Empire Drive community in District 2, where it took District 2 to 20,000, but we never did the math to see what the percentage was. I would like to see what that is. Thank you.
Mary, is your comment about this sort of upper Tomkai Cave Creek area?
No,
Okay. Let's
it's
look.
not. When I think about presenting a map, I think about that you need to give a narrative that justifies your decisions. I think we stand on good ground with what we've done with District District 3 for the reasons indicated. And of course, Hopland, there's a historical interest, there's the watershed, there's the agricultural interest. I think you can make a good stand for it. What I need, Dee, is give me and I haven't gotten anything from Ukiah, actually. What is the rationale for increasing the numbers in Ukiah? And I mean, I see that it makes it more compact, but is there anything else that can justify just moving those people? Because I also hear what Peter says.
It may not be within the city limits, but that neighborhood is Ukiah. It is not District 5. More so than any of the other areas of the District 5 that I identified as being the Ukiah greater area. And if we can make that work, it just makes sense for that area north of Empire Drive to be represented by District 2 and not by District 5 if we can justify it. If it's within the numbers, it just makes sense. Even though we haven't heard from anybody there specifically, we've answered to every public comment that we've received, and now let's look at what else we can do to make it make sense for the residents of those areas. I honestly believe that most people in that area or in the affected area of the greater Ukiah area don't realize what district they're in. Everybody I've asked, I've had people who think they're in District 1 and they are really in District 2. I've talked to people who think they're in District 2 and they're really in District 5. Because it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So if we can fix it even a little bit, I think we should make that effort.
This is when I come out with the variation. Again, I took that small piece that was south of Norgard Lane and put it back in the 1st district and put this entire neighborhood into the 2nd district. And the variation is, looks like about 12.3.
So too high.
Leaf, to go back to the way Peter was trying to understand the math, you're at D2 9.14 and D5 -8. I think in this case there's something weird. I mean, that would be more like.
Oh, you're correct. Yeah, I didn't take the lowest one. I was assuming that 4 was the lowest. You're right. That's going to be a lot more because I was using this one as the lowest.
So it doesn't. So we can't do it. It puts us.
It's going to be even more than 12. Right.
Yeah, but even though it makes sense to have it in D2, we can't do it. So we have to leave it in D5, at least for now.
I mean, you can see from the aerial photo that if you were in this neighborhood and you walked over to this neighborhood, would you think you're in a different community of interest? Probably not, right? So, I mean, the rationale is there. You just can't make the numbers work
right
that way.
We could, if it came down to it, I feel like we could justify going above the 10%, but I don't think that's an option for us. Even though legally we could, as long as we had a justification, we can go above the 10%, but I'm not so sure that we're willing to do that as a group.
Charlotte?
I just wanted to respond to that. I think to clarify the 10%, legally, we cannot exceed 10% to meet the maximum deviation from the substantial equal population. This is a constitutional principle. It's also codified in state law. We have to have substantially equal population. And so and that being said, and I know this commission has expressed and very clearly and in going very thoughtfully through all of the variations of moving populations and communities from into districts that they may be more aligned with or based on public comment. Even with that, I just want to point out or reiterate that the goal is not to get as close to 10% as possible, but to be sure that any changes you make do not exceed the 10% deviation, and that any changes you make that get close there to that exceed, a minimum deviation from the equal population are based on criteria that are not in conflict with and do not contradict what we are required to consider. So I think the commission has been thoughtfully considering not dividing census designated places, not dividing communities of interest, keeping in mind that there are communities of interest that might identify as being large, like greater Ukiah area, but understanding that based on population, there has to be some division. And so the goal in the criteria is minimizing division. And I certainly think the commission going in that direction, and you're continuing to work on this. But as in other where there is larger populations or cities with greater populations that exceed the 1/5 of total population, there is going to be division of a city. There is going to be. It just so happens that they're in, and I was turning video to make sure if I was.
Charlotte, you may want to turn off your video.
That
Did we lose Charlotte? Or
Yes.
This isn't on my end?
No, we lost. Charlotte's frozen. Yeah.
Oh man, I sometimes imagine what a real person meeting would be like with the problems of Zoom. Just like somebody would start breaking down. So I do think I really appreciate Dee's approach of wanting to really find out where the frontiers are. I think it's the right way to brainstorm, and I agree that it's in a certain way it's unfortunate that we can't make it work. So I do want to make sure that we've addressed Peter's concerns. There's the area that I mentioned that there could be argued that we. Is there another area, Peter, that you'd like to talk about that you're worried that we have somehow not performed our due diligence?
I think I want to see the map 9 and print it out and take a look at it. But I'll defer my thoughts further on this until our next meeting. Just don't have that stuff in front of me to be able to really think it through here. So no, I think for tonight, we've done about as much as we can do.
And I do want to make sure, I think Paula has called in, but she is on the phone. Might be hard for her to interject.
Actually, I'm on a computer, but I just can't get my video. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I am here watching all the maps go by.
Okay.
And the honest fact is that I don't know the Ukiah area as well as Dee does, and I am actually really learning a lot and very happy to find out about these different areas in Ukiah. So I'll interject when I got something else.
Okay, I thought you might have to press star 27 or something, and I wanted to make sure you were able to do that.
Yeah.
Dee, your hand's back up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just would like to ask Paula, I didn't realize she was with us. Can you just briefly clarify for me? I thought I understood you to say, I think at the last meeting, that the county only had a 53% response rate to the census. And what does that mean exactly?
Okay, actually it is a little higher. And I have my cheat sheet with me. Our total was about 56%. But it is divided up amongst 23 census tracts. So some of the census tracts had as low as like a 28% response rate. And I think the highest one was up in, there's a 68% one around Willis. So it varied all over the place. So that's what has caused some of these issues, where people are saying that there are a lot more people in their area, but if they didn't respond to the census, these are the numbers that we're bound by.
Yes.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And also, does your data, can you tell by your data if the higher response rates were in places like census designated places like the city of Ukiah, the city of Mendocino, the city of Fort Bragg, or was it not that clear of a division of where the highest responses were?
Well, of course, everything is totally unclear. Ukiah is divided into 4 areas. A census tract had to be no more than 2,500 people. And so like this, they're doing the same kind of thing. I have unincorporated West Ukiah at a 62.3%. One census tract in Ukiah did have a 74.6%, but they were 5% less than they were the one before. So that's it. And then Talmadge is its own. So there are 4 Ukiah places and the one West Ukiah unincorporated. And those ranges were from 53.7% up to the high of 74.6%.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman Farmer, I was wondering if I could ask Paula a question on that data.
Yes.
That's the initial response to the mail out?
No,
Okay.
that is the total response as of October 19th. So a few days after the census, from the mail out, the in-person, the on the phone or on computer.
Okay.
Yeah, so the whole gamut.
After that, when they get a non-response from an address, they actually send people out in a second wave to pick up a lot of that information that, the census doesn't end if you don't respond. There's a second wave of field workers that go out and try to track down that address and see if they can gather the information from that address.
That's true, but this is as of October 19th. So I don't know if they were sending people out after October 19th, but I know our group was hitting some houses that had been, people had been there 2 and 3 times. So.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know how that sequence of, their different cycles interact with that data.
And because the people on the ground, the census paid workers, the US Census Bureau workers came out later in the process. And there was an uptick when they were out in the streets going house to house also, as opposed to using the internet or the telephone option or the paper options. We got a wide variety.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How in those percentages, how is the denominator determined? The percent of what?
The percent, that would be the percent of responses in the census tract based on the LUCA, which I think Leaf had responded to before, the total number of households in that census tract. So, and I.
So in a perfect world with 100% response, you would have a certain percent not responding, but that would just be empty houses. That would be homes that people are not currently living in.
Theoretically, however, when we were doing some of the counts, we were documenting that the house was unoccupied, such as on Mencino Village, there are lots of vacation homes. And we were able to designate those as vacation homes. So the people weren't counted, but the fact that there was a response from that address was counted. Is that clear? It's a little convoluted, but.
Yeah, I'll probably, but in terms of ghost parcels and non-permitted ADUs, those might not appear in that denominator either. Is that my understanding
Might
of how this works?
Depending on who would go out and try to find places. When I was out doing stuff, I would try to find people living on the property, or, some people just said, there's somebody pitching a tent here, and we go, great, we'll count them.
Mhm.
Wherever you were, April 1st.
Well, thanks for doing that, Paula.
Yeah, thank you, Paula.
Well,
A lot of work, Paula.
Okay, do we have any public comment on the item number 5, consideration of maps based on community input?
We do have public comment. It looks like it's Ron Edwards, and I'll put him in now.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys taking these comments, because it's really interesting learning how this process works. And actually, instead of seeing it on the national news, to see how it actually facilitates at the local level. When we were looking at buying our property, I know that Cave Creek, one of the reasons we didn't buy out there is because you had a couple of creek crossings. So the only access to that really was Willits during most of the year. And also, I'd like to know, it was interesting hearing how the supervisors have input on these boundary lines. And I'm wondering how the supervisoral input is weighted against residential input. And I really want to thank Commissioner McNamee for thinking about the county being sued, because it seems like that is not considered a lot in the processes that are going on. And the other area would be future planning. You're drawing these maps and it looks like you know where the population is going. Is this information forwarded to a planning commissioner or someone when they're looking at, future development areas of maybe waiting areas that are underserved to balance this map? Because in 10 years, you're going to be coming back with the same issues. And I think that we have enough foresight to see where the population trend is going so that these districts can be better balanced, so that these maps will be easier to do in the future. Thank you.
Ron's a smart guy. He called into the Laytonville meeting too and had some interesting things to say about sort of bioregionalism and topography. But that is an interesting concept. I think that places that are losing population are perhaps some sort of indicator, feedback up the chain of governance that maybe there should be more attention paid there. That was an interesting comment about the Cave Creek area, and I hope we can hear more from people over there. Are there any other public comments?
That's it for public comment.
I also think we should nominate him for Redistricting Advisory Commissioner for 2031. So that brings us to agenda item number 6, community outreach. Other than having already found one of our commissioners for next time, let's get an update from the staff.
Oh, thank you, Chair Sherry Johnson. So we do continue to send out weekly e-notifications to over 900 subscribers. We also post on social media. We have did a press release for the board meeting yesterday and sent information to the papers for tonight's meeting. And we will also do a press release for next week's meeting for November 3rd, since it's the last public workshop. And that is my update. Thank you.
From the ad hoc, I hope everybody got to hear the radio short and we didn't embarrass you guys too much. At least that I didn't embarrass you guys too much. I have actually continued to hear from Max, and I've informed them that some cases I will be simply sort of reporting back for what happened, but I am going to talk to the Wallala Mac somewhere in mid-November and Redwood Valley Mac as well. I think the Redwood Valley Mac, if I remember, is going to be the day before our next meeting. So maybe we'll pull some Cave Creek public comment there. Anybody else want to report on? I know Dee, you've been continuing to do public outreach.
Yeah, just the two contacts that I shared earlier. That's all I have to share from the Round Valley Indian tribes and the other member of the Latinx community in Ukiah.
Do we have any other commissioner comment on this?
Yeah, Paula. Raise hand. There you go. I raised my hand. Yeah, the League of Women Voters has been putting this information in their newsletters that have gone out to, I think they have a huge mailing list also. So we've been kind of updating the dates and making sure that those things are known to them. Okay, that's it.
And there is, that radio short is on the KZOX homepage. You don't have to search through Jukebox to use it. So that is something that could be sent on to somebody. I know that Sarah Reith, when we were talking, she's always fun to talk to, but she's like, this is more interesting than I thought. I think we've all, at least I on this board, have been like, this is more important and a lot harder and more interesting than I thought. So do we have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment on this item.
So that brings us to agenda item number 7. Reviewing the timeline. We all have the timeline ahead of us. Our next meeting would be on November 3rd. I personally see no reason to try to add another one in the middle there. Is there anybody who, commissioner comment on that? Paula?
Oh, oops, I'm lost. No, I have no comment.
Okay. The first couple of meetings I read through the agenda, but I don't think that's necessary. We're not adding any meetings at this point, so there's no need to have a vote. Is there any public comment on our meeting agenda?
No public comment on this item either.
Okay, so let's move on to agenda item number 8, proposed topics for the upcoming meeting. We got staff updates, community of interest testimony, consideration of maps based on community input and redistricting criteria, narrowing of maps for recommendation for the Board of Supervisors, which will be on November 9th, community outreach, upcoming meetings, commission input. Is there any commission input on the next week's agenda? Anything we need to add? Is there something more specific to address Peter's concerns, sort of a review for, Mary used the word narrative. Is that something we need to be considering about these maps that we're going to be putting together next time? Is that specific to those maps? I guess I'm just asking, is there something, Peter, that you'd like to have some more specific review of justification or something like that?
I think I'm trying to think through the process here. So we have map number 9 that we received today. And presume we'll have more discussion about map number 9. And now there were several recommendations for changes to map number 9 that were made tonight. Maybe recommendations is the wrong word, but suggestions for changes to map number 9, particularly in the Ukiah area. So what I would be concerned about would be getting some community of interest, public input on what those maps change. If there's going to be a map number 10, that it be published early enough so the public has an opportunity to comment on it before we make a decision on narrowing the maps that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors. Does that clarify my concern?
It does.
Okay.
There is, this being an advisory committee, I think in terms of some of Dee's concerns, the second district supervisor is also going to be taking a look at these things. So I think that especially in some of those really fine changes, at some point, the supervisors are probably going to change it anyway. We've done a lot of the hard work, I think, and they will definitely be doing the sanding of the furniture. Mary? So let me just hold back for a second. Peter, is there something more specific though that in terms of adding to the agenda, specific to your concerns about potential litigation? Is there some sort of review? Is there something for Charlotte to lead? I don't know. Is there something we're missing here? This being our last meeting before we send these maps in?
I really hesitate to offer anything more than the caution. I just think we need to proceed cautiously. And my concern would be that we don't presume that we have more latitude to make boundary line changes than we actually have, as sustained by a test of the law. And so Charlotte, of course, is the arbitrator of that in the end. And if she's comfortable that the maps that we propose to the Board of Supervisors have been vetted and that we have substantial and adequate public input and review to sustain a challenge if it's made, then I would defer to her. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight, and this was really the point of my comment earlier, that we don't lose sight of that we do not have as much latitude as we might like in drawing lines. We have the latitude that the law allows us. And I think Charlotte has done a good job of helping to define that, but it is kind of a nebulous area. And therefore, like I said, I'm worst case scenario kind of guy. So I'm always the guy who says, wait a minute, have we thought this through completely before we proceed? So that's the basis of my caution. And I don't really have any more to add tonight to that, other than to say, I do think based on those revisions that have been suggested tonight, that we try to get some public input onto whether or not there's any big problem with those being incorporated in a map number 10, I suppose, this next week, because we're up against our deadline. I've beat this horse a lot, I know, but I just want to remind you, if we'd had more time, if we'd been able to start a lot earlier, and solicit more public input, then I believe we'd be on stronger and stronger ground for the recommendations. Unfortunately, we're under a collapsed timeline because of the late delivery of the data to us. So it behooves us to be very cautious in that regard, since the court doesn't really care when we got the data. It just cares about whether we've met the law. So that's my point.
I do want to understand, so Peter, and I guess Charlotte, is the concern with litigation that a private citizen within Mendocino County who feels that they have been, let's use the word disenfranchised by this process would bring suit, or is there an outside entity that looks for opportunities to sue? How would that go? What is that process?
Through the chair, and I'm going to leave my video off to hopefully minimize any internet issues. But I really hesitate to speculate on this. You know, one, we're just talking about making changes to the agenda. Two, I think we have to just focus on, the commission should focus on the criteria and continue to use that when refining the maps and deciding on recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. But I don't want to speculate or offer any opinions or suggestions as to something that we just can't anticipate. But I appreciate the commission wanting to be thoughtful and make sure that the process is followed in a way that anything you do recommend to the Board of Supervisors would withstand any challenges. We simply can't predict the future or what those challenges might be. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. And of course, if there's an item you want me to kind of research and present back at the next meeting, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. And I was not asking for speculation. I was more interested in the historical sense of what the concern is. But I understand if that's not something that we should be talking about either, especially inside of this item. But I completely understand the difference between speculation and history. And I feel like that's what Peter is referencing. Mary? And so I'm going to take it that Peter does not feel like we're missing an agenda item here.
That's right.
Mary?
I will say at some point when we were looking at, I was looking at feedback and I was looking at our proposals to change things, that I thought, is this our changes or is this constituents or the voters or the community of interest changes? And I thought, you have to weigh that. So I do see that point. The other thing is I'm used to like presenting when I present options. Need to know what's the history, and Leaf probably knows. Do you just give the supervisors one to however many maps you have, or do you have to do a presentation? What is the preferred method?
I think that was a question for Leaf.
Chairman Farmer, we've only had a Citizens Advisory Commission once before, and they presented two options to the board, mainly because the commission at that time could not reach a consensus between one map or the other. As it's been outlined to you by Charlotte and Sherry and the Board of Supervisors, I think your task is, if you want to present one map, you're certainly able to do that, but you're not limited to one option, as best as I can tell. And Charlotte could either confirm that or not, but my guess is you can put out more than one option to the board. And in all past redistricting processes that I've been involved with, be it a staff commission or a citizens commission, The board has to go through their part of the process as well. And as you mentioned, they tend to do a bit of fine tuning. They don't want to get too far afield from the different options, but it is their task to do some fine tuning and to make sure that, they have to approve something that meets the criteria in the law, just as you do. So, if you put something out there that they're uncomfortable with that pushes those boundaries, it might be good to have a couple of options for them to choose from.
Charlotte?
Just as Leaf was saying, you have the option to recommend a map or maps. We've simply offered the suggestion of offering 2 to 4 maps, just simply because you have the option to do so, and you do want to narrow it to a small number. But I think in light of the limited time you've had and the way the maps have evolved, I think you're well on the track of having a few maps to consider next week, keeping in mind any additional maps may be published this week. I know there's been discussion of some revisions to map 9 and map 8 that might that will be published, at least one version and maybe more before our next meeting. So I think, yes, you can recommend 1 or more to the Board of Supervisors.
Which I do think we have, maps 1 and 2 show what you can pull off without starting to stretch towards 7 point something deviation. And that, I think that is an important thing that we receive public comment on, that if there is significantly more public comment preferring these maps that do get to 7.3, that will be really strong justification for why we did make that. I've been thinking about that like a slalom, like a slalom skiing in the Olympics. They don't want to hit 0 cones or 0 poles, right? Because that means they're probably going too slow. There's that they figure that out, how many they want to kind of strategize with. So I do think that those, we might want to think about presenting those earlier maps just to show what it looks like to be at a lower percentage, or we should consider asking that a map similar to 9 be created that sort of sucks back in and makes some compromises, if for no other reason than to sort of test our theory that people will prefer 9. Leaf?
Thank you, Chairman. Based on my past experience, I'll just throw this out there for the Commission's thinking process, that you don't want to have too many draft maps. It dilutes your position.
Mm-hmm.
The fewer options means that you're strongly, you feel very strongly about the ones you do present. But I don't mean that in any way to limit the number of drafts that you present to the board. It's just my observation of past redistricting processes.
Leave it in the board meeting. There did seem to be strong consensus about being okay with 7.3. But do you think we should work on a map that brings it down, just to have that as an option for them?
I think that you're under 10%. I wouldn't want to get up to 8%. I myself would feel pretty uncomfortable with that. And they may as well as a supervisor. I think as all the commissioners here have found out, that there's a lot of competing criteria. And I think the work that you've done shows that you're really trying to balance the criteria with the population balancing aspect. And what I mean by other criteria is the compactness and the the communities of interest. And I think when you start to really look at the communities of interest in the census designated places, I think you've done a pretty good job so far with the population balancing that you've had to do because of the difference.
Charlotte?
I think we're at a natural pause, so I was just going to caution that we're kind of veering off the agenda a little bit, and that we're on just items for next week's agenda. If the commission would like some more detailed discussion, I think there is room in the category we have for next week, consideration of maps based on community input and redistricting criteria and the narrowing of maps. I think there's plenty of room next week to talk about these issues, but certainly if the commission has some proposals, or any of the public submit any proposals for additional maps, we are kind of coming up on the deadline to provide LEAF enough adequate time to create them, calculate the population deviations, and put the census, the citizen voting age population data together in time to review at the next meeting.
Yeah, I do realize that we sort of are not treating Robert's rules very well. I think that I personally hadn't really put it together that we were about to come to the end of the meeting without having given LEAF any direction, really, other than those minor adjustments around Ukiah. And is there, but we can just move on if that's what we need to do. So is there any, do we have any commissioner comment? I guess we've had plenty of commissioner comment on next week's agenda. Do we have any public comment on next week's agenda?
We have one public comment from Ron Edwards. Let me get him in here.
Thank you, commissioners. I know a lot of you have only been in Mendocino County for 20 years, and my CV is not well known. But if I would make a suggestion to you from my sales background, is that when you go to the board, no more than 3 options. It's always been the best to present the best one of 2. And then when they pick that one, then put the third one up there and say, pick the one of these 2. And the sale is closed. So too many options really just gets confusing on that one. And I think in listening to the board, it sounded to me as a member of the public that they wanted to take the easiest route out. And if it had to go right up to the 10%, they were acceptable with that just to get it done. So those are just my comments. Thank you very much.
Once again, he's nominated. Okay.
I second.
So I guess without adding any meetings, there's nothing to vote on. And I would like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Mhm.